How smart families prepare the non-financial spouse before it's too late. So imagine this. You've managed wealth all of your life, and then suddenly you're gone. What happens next? Who's going to handle all of the affairs that you were taking care of over the years? According to a study by McKinsey, about 70% of widows leave their financial advisors within the first year of their spouse's death. I think that's telling. I think it's something you should be thinking about as you look at your long-term planning. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Think about all of the planning you do for things that may never arise. You have auto insurance. You have homeowners insurance. Your house may never burn down. You may never get in a car accident. When it comes to death, that's pretty certain. We make very few guarantees in this world, but the one guarantee that will make every client or couple is that you will become infirmed, or you will pass away, or both at some point. Why don't we start planning properly now for that before it's too late? We've helped countless families deal with the death of the first spouse and handling the affairs for the second spouse. Typically, what we find is there's a financial spouse and a non-financial spouse. A buddy of mine once joked, he said his advisor meets the spouse at the funeral. And I thought, boy, that's kind of strange, isn't it?
And I think that's why there's a 70% attrition rate with widows, because we find that financial advisors only concentrate on one spouse, not both. And it's not always husband versus wife, but it's only one. And that's why they meet the other one at the funeral, that makes no sense to us. But
well, and think about it. If the husband has friends and the wife has friends, and let's say the husband dies, is the wife going to call the husband's friends to go to the theater or to the baseball game? No, the survivor's going to go to the people that they're most familiar with. And so when you think about it from an advisor standpoint, the spouse is going to go to somebody that is familiar to them. So we work with high net worth families. These are the types of things that you want to be thinking about long before it's too late. It's all part of the planning process. I think a comfort level is extremely important. And I think there's three ways this happens. One is spouse dies suddenly. Surviving spouse has to pick up the pieces relatively quickly. It's an emotional time. It's a little bit of a fire drill.
It's panic-stricken.
Panic-stricken. The second one is the financial spouse says to the non-financial spouse, I'm going to hire somebody so that you have somebody if I'm gone. And the third scenario is the non-financial spouse tells the financial spouse, we need to get somebody because when you're gone, I need to have somebody to pick up the pieces. So we think about that, the emotion and everything else. I think it's extremely important for people.
You know what's interesting is sometimes there's pushback by the non-financial spouse because it's not something they like to do. They think their husband or wife is immortal and it's never going to happen. They don't want to go to the meetings. It's not fun. It's jargon that they don't understand. I had a client the other day come in, and as she walked in the door, she goes, I feel like I'm going to the principal's office. I said, is that better or worse than the dentist? But the point is that she doesn't like to do it. And I said, I'm really glad that you do get out of your comfort zone and join us, because someday it could be really important. Well, it's really important that you know me, first of all, but it could be really important that you have a working understanding of what we're doing to plan for your long-term retirement.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that this isn't an issue of performance, your investment portfolio performance, which really we don't think is a great metric of a good advisor. I think it's about knowing the right questions to ask and knowing how to solve the problem when it happens.
Yeah, and additionally, it's peace of mind and confidence. These conversations and getting them outside their comfort zone creates those two things, which are hard to value, hard to quantify, but immensely important. This video is for educational purposes only. Always consult qualified professionals before making any legal, tax, or investment decisions.
So let's go back to the 70% of women. And this isn't just about women. We're not saying that women are the non-financial spouse, because it's becoming more and more prevalent that they are the financial spouse. But I think it's interesting that there's a lot of studies on women and investing and
I'm with you. That
There are a lot
stat,
more widows than there are widowers out there.
that stat really jumps out at me. 70% of anything is and there's some studies that are actually higher than that I've seen. So that noteworthy.
Here's what proactive families do before the death of a surviving spouse. We're going to talk about 6 planning pillars.
Going to make sure their spouse is never left behind. That's really the goal here. Build a financial organizer. It's a lot of work to do it right, but it pays huge dividends for spouses and kids to be able to simply go to one document and really be able to uncover most of their financial life.
So just for reference, the financial organizer that we refer to, we have a document that we call the financial organizer that we ultimately put into a black binder, and we call it the black book. And it could have anything from the name of the veterinarian to the name of the attorney to who to call in the event that there's a problem, names of the insurance companies where the accounts are held.
How important are passwords today? You're locked out of everything if you don't have passwords.
Yeah. So one of the key planning points here is, what information does the surviving spouse need? Well, they need to be able to get on their cell phone. Your cell phone is part of your identity today. 2, they need to be able to get on your computer. They need to be able to access the password to work on your computer. And 3rd, they need access to your email. Really critically important. So as you do this financial organizer or this black book, make sure the non-financial spouse is involved in the preparation of it. Number 2, annual reviews, or at least annual reviews.
The funeral's clearly not the time for your spouse to meet your advisor.
So, having them involved in the meetings, just hearing and listening, even if it's by osmosis, that they get a better flavor as to what's going on. So the big mistake, keeping the financial conversations to yourself. And the best practice is to bring the non-financial spouse at least annually to the meeting.
Yeah, and I feel strongly that a lot of times the financial spouse wants to share with their non-financial spouse, but they don't want to. They don't feel like dealing with it. They don't. It's not something they like. Like I said earlier, not something that they want to do. It's really imperative to make the effort to at least have a working understanding of what's going on.
And I think their input is critical too. So for them to sit there and listen only is, I think, a mistake. They need to contribute their feelings and their thoughts. Number 3, appoint a transition ally. Who are you going to get to help? Might be a child, might be a niece or nephew, might be a friend. But I think having somebody there to work with you, to have your hand held along the way, is critically important.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't have kids. And I know this is not a novel thought, but people that don't have kids end up with more money. Those of us who have raised kids understand that clearly. So you then have to go even dig deeper to find that next ally, that next person that'll help you out.
Yeah, so I think the best practice is to just formalize a handoff between those two people. So number 4.
Rehearse the first 90 days of being alone.
There are a lot of mistakes that could be made, but one of them is to make rash decisions in that first 90 days. Sometimes it's better just to let things settle down and think about any important decisions. Hopefully a lot of the important decisions are already made because of the planning process.
So here's the problem with that, is that if a spouse dies at Thanksgiving, you have less than 40 days of the tax year. And there's some really important decisions that can be made, need to be made in that tax year because you're still a joint taxpayer. So as opposed to the next year, you're single. And if you've ever looked at the tax tables, it's ugly, the difference between being a joint taxpayer and a single taxpayer.
I often joke with clients and say, if your spouse is on the deathbed on New Year's Eve, tell the doctor to keep them alive until after the ball drops. So the best practice is to map out decisions prior to anything happening before they do. Pillar number 5.
Confirm them and revisit them. Make sure they're correct. We've seen horror stories of beneficiaries that were never changed, and once you've passed on, they're irrevocable.
Yeah, so I think another point is you should review all of your documents every couple of years. Your estate planning, your wills, living wills, powers of attorney, trust documents. If for long-term care policies, if for no other reason, to refresh your recollection as to what they were. And I think the big mistake is People don't do that. So let's talk about some real life examples. Here's a failed approach. We had a client whose sister would come into all the meetings, and she would say, my advisor never asks me about those things. I find it very interesting. And what was great was the non-client sister was helping the client sister with the planning, being that second person, which was genius. The non-client sister, I said, do you want us to take a look and see if we can help you? And she said, no, I've been with these guys for 20 years. Lo and behold, non-client sister passes away suddenly. They kind of, she runs unresponsive, and she was deceased in her apartment. It was a disaster. I mean, it took hours and hours and hours. We worked with our client's spouse and the attorneys to try to get this right. Things like her IRA had no beneficiary. And you scratch your head and you say, with a little bit of planning, how could things have been better? Now, a good outcome, remember getting a phone call about 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And when the phone rings at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, it's typically not good. It's not asking,
how was your golf game yesterday? Yeah, unlikely.
And so this woman called me and she said, Paul, Jimmy died. Can you help? And this question I get all the time is, can you help? And I said, there's no need to help. Everything's done. All that stuff we've been doing for the last decade has prepared you for this.
Yeah, but understand what they're going through at that point in time. They're panicked. Mm-hmm. And they want reassurance.
And they forget.
They forget. Sometimes they know, but they just want reassurance. All those meetings that I went to, all that planning that I overheard or was involved with, now it's game time. Is it there? Am I going to be okay? And they just want that initial reassurance. It's invaluable to be able to give them that luxury.
But from a tactical standpoint, everything's been done. The beneficiaries were made, and we had to update some paperwork to transfer assets into her name alone. But for the most part, it was a pretty simple transition. And that's what proper planning is. You make it easy when that time comes, because, as we often say, when it's your turn, we better be prepared. So what do you do next? I think the question is, if I got hit by lightning today at noon, how is my spouse going to handle this? Who's going to be my personal CFO? Who's going to guide us through this? Should my advisor be one of the first calls? If your advisor isn't one of your first calls, probably something isn't being done right.
And a lot of times it's a first call, and it's not a long call, because you're just reassuring them that we've already mapped this out. We've already thought about this. The contingencies are in place. Take care of yourself, take care of your family. In a couple of weeks, when you can breathe, we'll get together and we'll sort out the transitional things that need to be done.
Yeah, we talked about creating a checklist, the black book. Discussion, communication is invaluable for this. Make sure everybody's on the same page with this. So I think the best gift you can give someone is, especially your spouse, is the legacy that it's not just the portfolio, it's not just the money, but it's the security and the clarity of what's going to go on if you're not here anymore. The plan speaks for itself. The planning's the planning. It's the peace of mind of knowing that we've already thought this through.
Once your spouse is prepared, the next step is legal protection. Having a will isn't enough. In our next video, we'll show how the wealthy protect their heirs from taxes, creditors, and divorce. Click here to learn how to keep your plan airtight.